Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching Earth grow smaller through the massive viewing window. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, a blue marble hanging in the black void. She could not see the crowded cities, the polluted air, or the angry faces of the people who wanted her passengers gone forever. Behind her, the ship hummed with the sounds of 100,000 people starting a new life. Children laughed in the corridors. Families unpacked their few belongings in tiny rooms. Engineers checked the massive engines that would carry them to a new world. They all believed they were heroes, brave pioneers heading to the stars to build something better. Sarah knew the truth. She had read the secret orders locked in her personal safe. This was not a mission of hope. This was exile. Earth's government wanted these people gone, and they never planned to let them return. The year was 2387, and Earth was dying slowly. Too many people lived on the planet now. The air was thick and hard to breathe in most cities. Fresh water was expensive. Food grew in huge factories instead of on farms. The oceans were rising, swallowing coastal cities. Billions of people fought for space and resources. But that was not why these people were being sent away. Earth's leaders had decided that some humans were problems that needed to be solved. Political dissidents who asked too many questions about the government. Religious groups who worshipped in ways the state did not approve. Scientists who studied things the authorities thought were dangerous. Artists who painted pictures that made people think uncomfortable thoughts. Even families whose children were born with unusual genes that made them different. Sarah's ship was one of 12 massive vessels leaving Earth that day. Each ship carried between 50,000 and 100,000 passengers. Together, they held over 1 million people that Earth no longer wanted. The government called it the final wave, the last great colonial expedition. They told the passengers they were chosen for their skills and courage. The truth was simpler and crueler. These were the people Earth wanted to forget. Sarah walked through the ship's corridors, listening to the excited voices around her. In the agriculture section, farmers examined the seeds they would plant on their new world. They talked about the soil they would find and the crops they would grow. In the workshops, engineers built tools and machines they would need to construct their colony. Teachers prepared lessons for children who would grow up under alien stars. Dr. James Wright found Sarah near the ship's central garden, a large room filled with plants that cleaned the air and provided food. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been exiled for asking too many questions about government experiments on human genetics. "Captain," he said quietly, "I've been reviewing our destination files. Something doesn't feel right about this mission." Sarah looked around to make sure no one could hear them. "What do you mean, Doctor?" "The planet we're heading to, Kepler 442b. The surveys show it's habitable, but barely. The gravity is 30% stronger than Earth's. The air has less oxygen. The weather patterns are violent and unpredictable. Why would they send colonists to such a difficult world when there are easier planets available?" Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Dr. Wright was intelligent and observant. She could not tell him the truth, but she could not lie to him either. "Perhaps they believe we're capable of handling the challenge." Dr. Wright studied her face carefully. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "I see. Thank you for your honesty, Captain." As the weeks passed, Sarah watched her passengers adapt to life in space. The ship was like a small city with neighborhoods and communities forming naturally. The engineers worked with the farmers to improve the ship's systems. The teachers started schools for the children. The artists painted murals on the walls, making the metal corridors feel more like home. But Sarah noticed other things too. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, reported that all messages sent toward Earth were being blocked by some kind of interference. The ship's computer systems had been programmed with restrictions that prevented them from changing course or returning to Earth. Even Sarah's captain codes could not override these limitations. Most disturbing of all was what they found when they reached the edge of the solar system. Long-range sensors detected the wreckage of 3 ships that had left Earth 5 years earlier, as part of an earlier colonial wave. The ships had been destroyed, but not by accident or equipment failure. They had been attacked by automated defense systems, machines left behind to make sure no colonial ship could return home. Sarah gathered her senior officers in the conference room and shared what she had discovered. The room fell silent as she explained the truth about their mission. "We're not colonists," she said finally. "We're exiles. Earth doesn't want us to succeed. They want us to disappear. Commander Lisa Park, the ship's second-in-command, spoke first. What do we tell the passengers? Nothing for now, Sarah replied. Let them keep their hope. We'll need time to figure out our next step. But keeping secrets on a ship was nearly impossible. Within days, rumors spread through the corridors. Some people demanded answers from the crew. Others refused to believe the truth even when presented with evidence. A few became angry and talked about finding ways to return to Earth for revenge. Dr. Wright organized a meeting of the ship's informal leaders, the engineers, teachers, farmers, and other respected members of the community. Sarah attended and explained everything she knew about their situation. So what do we do now? Asked Maria Santos, the head of the agriculture team. We can't go back, and we're heading to a world that might kill us. We survive, said Dr. Wright firmly. We adapt. We prove that Earth was wrong about us. An engineer named David Kim stood up. We have other ships in our fleet. We should coordinate with them, share resources and information. Together, we might find a better solution than the planet we're heading toward. Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time since reading her secret orders. These people were remarkable. Even faced with exile and possible death, they were already planning how to build something better. Over the following months, the 12 ships in the fleet established regular communication with each other. They shared technical knowledge, cultural traditions, and moral support. Children from different ships became friends through video messages. Scientists collaborated on research projects. Artists created works that celebrated their shared journey. As they traveled deeper into space, they also began to change. The ship's environment was different from Earth's. Lower gravity, recycled air, artificial light cycles. The children adapted fastest, growing taller and stronger than they would have on Earth. Adults found their reflexes improving in the reduced gravity. Everyone became more careful with resources, more cooperative with their neighbors. By the time they reached their destination, they were no longer quite the same people who had left Earth. They had become something new, humans shaped by the void between stars, united by shared rejection and common purpose. Sarah stood on the bridge again as Kepler 442b filled the viewing window. The planet looked harsh and unwelcoming, with violent storms covering half its surface, but her passengers no longer saw it as their only option. They had learned that home was not a place given to them by others. Home was something they would build together, wherever they chose to make their stand. The real journey was just beginning. The human fleet had been traveling for 3 years. When they received their first message from an alien civilization, Captain Sarah Chen was eating dinner in her quarters when Lieutenant Torres burst through the door, his face pale with excitement and fear. Captain, you need to come to the bridge immediately. We're receiving a transmission, but it's not from any human ship. Sarah followed him to the bridge, where the main screen displayed complex patterns of light and sound. The ship's computer was working to translate the signal, and slowly words began to form in the air above the control panel. Unknown vessels. This is the Zephyrian Border Authority. You are approaching restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Dr. Wright, who had become Sarah's unofficial advisor, looked up from the translation console. Captain, this is incredible. We've made first contact with an alien species. Sarah felt her heart racing. Humanity's first meeting with beings from another world. This could change everything. Perhaps these aliens would welcome them, offer them a home, share their knowledge and technology. Open a channel, she ordered. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel New Horizon. We are peaceful explorers seeking a new world to call home. We come in friendship and hope for dialogue. The response came quickly, and it crushed their hopes like a hammer blow. Humans. Yes, we know of your species. Your reputation precedes you. You are aggressive, unpredictable, and genetically chaotic. Your emotional instability makes you dangerous to ordered civilizations. You are not welcome in Zephyrian space. Alter your course immediately or face destruction. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Sarah stared at the empty screen, trying to understand what had just happened. How could these aliens already know about humans? Earth had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, and this was their first expedition into deep space. Over the following weeks, as the fleet changed course and traveled to other star systems, the pattern repeated itself. Every alien civilization they encountered already knew about humanity, and none of them wanted contact. The hegemony of Vel were aquatic beings who lived in vast underwater cities on ocean worlds. Their representative was a graceful creature with flowing tentacles and large, intelligent eyes. Through their translation devices, it spoke in a voice like singing water. "Humans are emotionally volatile primitives," it said during their brief communication. "Your species experiences anger, fear, and aggression in ways that interfere with rational thought. You make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. This makes you unsuitable for inclusion in civilized galactic society." The machine collective, called the Synthesis, refused even to speak with them directly. Instead, they sent an automated message that played on repeat whenever human ships approached their territory. Biological species designation: human. Status: incompatible with ordered existence. Reason: unpredictable organic neural patterns create chaos in networked systems. Recommendation: maintain minimum safe distance of 50 light-years from all synthesis installations. Each rejection was different, but they all carried the same message. Humanity was flawed, dangerous, and unwanted. The galaxy's civilizations had apparently been watching Earth for decades, studying human behavior, and reaching the same conclusion that Earth's government had. Humans were a problem that needed to be contained. Captain Elena Vasquez of the ship Perseverance tried to force the issue. Her vessel approached a Vel research station, broadcasting messages of peace and requesting emergency medical aid for sick passengers. The aliens responded by activating automated defense systems that destroyed the ship in seconds. 5,000 humans died in the attack, and the other ships could only watch helplessly from a safe distance. After that, the fleet became more careful. They avoided alien territories and searched for uninhabited worlds where they might build colonies. But even that proved nearly impossible. Most planets suitable for human life were already claimed by one civilization or another. The few unclaimed worlds were hostile: radiation-scorched rocks orbiting dying stars, frozen ice balls in the outer reaches of solar systems, or tidally locked planets with one side burning and the other frozen. Desperate families began attempting to settle on these marginal worlds anyway. The colony ship Hope's End landed on a barren moon with barely breathable atmosphere. Within 6 months, half the colonists were dead from radiation poisoning. The survivors begged to be evacuated, their children born with terrible genetic damage that no human medicine could treat. The settlement on Frozen Dawn lasted longer, but the constant cold and artificial light systems drove many colonists to madness. They fought among themselves over resources and space. By the end of the first year, the colony had collapsed into violence and chaos. Sarah watched these failures with growing despair. Her own ship, the New Horizon, had avoided landing anywhere, instead staying in space and mining asteroids for resources. But their supplies were running low, and their equipment was wearing out. People were getting sick from the stress and artificial environment. Children were being born with bone problems from the low gravity. 15 years after leaving Earth, the human fleet had been reduced from 12 ships to 7. The original 1.2 million passengers had dwindled to fewer than 400,000. Some had died in failed colonies. Others had succumbed to disease, accidents, or despair. A few had simply vanished, taking small ships and disappearing into the void between stars. But something unexpected was happening among the survivors. The children who had grown up during the journey were different from their parents. They called themselves the Voidborn, and they had adapted to life in space in ways that amazed the older generation. Maya Chen Okafor was Sarah's granddaughter, born during the journey and now 15 years old. She was tall and thin, with bones that were light but strong. Her reflexes were incredibly fast, and she could move through the ship's zero-gravity sections with a grace that made older crew members dizzy just watching. More importantly, the Voidborn seemed to have developed a different way of thinking about their situation. Where the older generation saw exile and rejection, the young people saw freedom and opportunity. They did not dream of finding a planet to call home. They were already home among the stars. "Why do we need to live on a planet?" Maya asked Sarah one day as they floated in the observation deck, watching a nebula paint the darkness with sheets of colored light. "The aliens don't want us on their worlds, and the empty planets try to kill us. But space is infinite. We can make our home here moving between the stars, taking what we need from asteroids and dead systems." Sarah looked at her granddaughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. This young woman had never seen a sunrise or felt rain on her face. She had never walked through a forest or swum in an ocean, yet she spoke of space as home with complete conviction. But what kind of life is that? Sarah asked. Always moving, never settling down, living in metal boxes between the stars? Maya smiled, and in that smile Sarah saw something new, a confidence and strength that the older generation had lost during their years of rejection and failure. It's our life, grandmother. The aliens look at us and see chaos and danger. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are too wild and unpredictable for their ordered worlds. But that doesn't make us wrong. It just makes us different. As the fleet continued its journey through the galaxy, the Voidborn began to take on more responsibilities. They were better adapted to space travel, more creative at solving technical problems, and less burdened by memories of Earth. Under their influence, the remaining ships began to change from desperate refugee vessels into something new, a nomadic civilization that moved between the stars like ancient tribes had moved across Earth's continents. They learned to mine asteroids with makeshift equipment. They built hydroponic gardens that produced food in zero gravity. They developed new technologies by combining human engineering with salvaged alien materials found on dead worlds. Most importantly, they created a culture that celebrated adaptation and survival rather than mourning what they had lost. But even as they adapted to their new life, the Voidborn never forgot the lesson that rejection had taught them. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also hostile to those who were different. They would have to be strong, clever, and united to survive in a universe that saw them as unwanted chaos. They had no idea that this strength would soon be tested in ways they could never imagine. 33 years had passed since the human fleet left Earth, and Captain Sarah Chen was now an old woman with silver hair and tired eyes. She walked slowly through the corridors of the New Horizon, using a cane to steady herself in the ship's artificial gravity. Around her, the vessel hummed with activity, but it sounded different than it had during those first hopeful years. The walls were patched with metal plates salvaged from a dozen different alien wrecks. The lighting flickered occasionally, as power systems that were never meant to run for decades struggled to keep working. Strange smells drifted from the hydroponic gardens, where Earth plants had been crossbred with alien specimens to create new foods that could grow in space. The ship's population had changed too. Sarah passed a group of children playing in a corridor, and she could see how different they were from the Earthborn generation. These Voidborn were tall and lean, with pale skin that had never seen sunlight. Their eyes were larger than normal, adapted to the dim lighting of space habitats. They moved with a fluid grace in the low gravity, laughing as they played games that would have been impossible on a planet. Maya Chen Okafor, now 30 years old, found Sarah near the observation deck. Maya had become the unofficial leader of the Voidborn generation, and Sarah could see the authority in her bearing. She wore clothes made from recycled materials and alien fabrics, decorated with patterns that told the story of humanity's journey through the stars. "Grandmother," Maya said, settling beside Sarah on a bench facing the viewing window. Outside, an asteroid mining operation was in progress, with small ships using improvised equipment to extract metals and ice. "The council is meeting tonight to discuss the transmission from Earth." Sarah nodded wearily. After 30 years of silence, Earth had finally sent a message to the exile fleet. The transmission had taken weeks to decode, as it used old encryption methods that the fleet's computers barely remembered. The contents had shocked everyone who heard them. "Have you decided what you'll recommend?" Maya asked. Sarah stared out at the mining operation, watching workers in patched spacesuits guide massive chunks of asteroid toward the processing ships. These people had learned to survive in the harshest environment imaginable. They had turned asteroid mining into an art form, hydroponics into a science, and jury-rigged engineering into a philosophy of life. The message from Earth had offered them something they thought they would never hear, an invitation to return home, but Sarah knew better than to trust Earth's sudden generosity. The transmission had been carefully worded, speaking of valuable genetic adaptations and unique evolutionary developments among the exile populations. Earth scientists were interested in studying the Voidborn, learning how human genetics had changed during decades in space. They wanted to treat her people like laboratory specimens. "Earth sees us as test subjects," Sarah said finally. "They want to study how we've adapted to space. They're not offering us a home. They're offering us a cage with better food." Maya was quiet for a moment, watching a young engineer guide a massive ore container toward the ship's cargo bay. with nothing but magnetic grapples and careful thruster work. The operation required split-second timing and perfect coordination between a dozen different workers. On Earth, they would have used expensive automated systems. Here in the void, humans had learned to do the impossible with spare parts and determination. Some of the older generation want to go back, Maya said. They still remember Earth as home. They're tired of living in ships, tired of never seeing a real sky or breathing unprocessed air. And what do the Voidborn think? Maya smiled, but there was sadness in it. Most of us have never seen a planet, grandmother. We don't know what we're supposed to be homesick for. The ships are our home. The void between stars is our territory. We've learned to live here, to thrive here. Why should we go back to a world that threw us away? That evening, the fleet's council gathered in the New Horizons main assembly hall. Representatives from all 7 remaining ships attended either in person or through video links. The room was filled with people of all ages, from elderly Earthborn exiles to young Voidborn who had been born during the journey. Dr. Wright, now in his 80s but still sharp and alert, stood to address the assembly. Friends, we face a choice that will determine the future of our people. Earth offers us a return to our birth world, but we must ask ourselves, what price are they asking us to pay? Commander Lisa Park, Sarah's old second-in-command, spoke from the screen representing the ship Endurance. Some of our people are dying out here. The older generation especially. We're living longer than anyone expected in these conditions, but we're not thriving. Earth has medical facilities we can only dream of, technologies that could extend our lives and ease our suffering. A young Voidborn engineer named David Kim Santos stood up. His parents had been among the original exiles, but he had spent his entire life in space. Commander Park, with respect, we've survived 30 years without Earth's help. We've learned to repair our bodies with salvaged medical equipment. We've developed treatments for conditions that Earth's doctors have never seen. Why should we trust them now? An older woman named Maria Santos, one of the original agricultural specialists, spoke with emotion in her voice. Because I want to see a real sky before I die. I want to feel rain on my face and smell flowers that grew in soil instead of nutrient tanks. I want to walk on solid ground that doesn't shake with engine vibrations. Her words created a ripple of emotion through the assembly. Many of the older generation nodded in agreement. They had spent decades dreaming of the world they had lost. But a void-born woman named Elena Vasquez Wright stood up to respond. Maria, I understand your longing. But Earth is not the same world you remember. The messages we've received describe a planet that's more crowded, more polluted, more controlled than when you left, and they want us to return not as citizens but as specimens to be studied. Dr. Wright called for order as the debate grew heated. Let's examine the facts, he said calmly. Earth's message specifically mentions their interest in our unique adaptations and evolutionary developments. They want to study how our genetics have changed during our time in space. They're particularly interested in the Voidborn generation. Sarah stood slowly, leaning on her cane. The room fell silent as the eldest captain prepared to speak. I've spent 30 years leading this fleet, watching our people die on hostile worlds and in the cold vacuum of space. I've seen us adapt and survive in conditions that should have killed us all. I've watched our children grow up to be stronger and more capable than we ever were. She paused, looking around the room at faces both young and old, Earthborn and Voidborn. Earth threw us away because they thought we were broken. They believed we were too chaotic, too unpredictable, too dangerous for their ordered society. Now they want us back, because we've become something they can't create in their laboratories. The room was completely quiet now. The question we must ask ourselves is simple. Are we the same people who left Earth 30 years ago? Or have we become something new? Something that belongs among the stars rather than on any planet? Maya stood and walked to the center of the room. As she moved, other Voidborn began to join her, until nearly half the assembly was standing together. We are the children of the void, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. We were born among the stars, and we've learned to call space our home. We don't need Earth's acceptance or their medical facilities. We need freedom to continue our journey, to explore the galaxy on our own terms. An elderly man named Thomas Park spoke from his wheelchair. But what about those of us who are dying? What about the people who still dream of returning to the world where they were born? Maya looked at him with compassion. Uncle Thomas, we would never force anyone to stay. Those who want to return to Earth should be free to go. But those of us who choose to remain among the stars should be equally free to continue our journey. The debate continued for hours, but gradually a consensus emerged. The fleet would send a diplomatic mission to Earth, but not to negotiate a return for the entire population. Instead, they would establish contact as representatives of a new kind of human civilization, one that had learned to thrive in the void between worlds. Some individuals would choose to return to Earth, accepting whatever terms the planetary government offered, but the majority would remain in space, continuing their nomadic existence among the asteroids and dead systems that other species ignored. As the meeting ended and people began to file out of the assembly hall, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. Maya stood beside her, looking out through the hall's large viewing window at the starfield beyond. "Are we making the right choice, grandmother?" Sarah followed her granddaughter's gaze to the stars. Out there in the darkness were wonders and dangers that earthbound humans could never imagine. There were ancient ruins on dead worlds, alien technologies waiting to be discovered, and vast stretches of empty space where a resourceful people could build a new kind of civilization. "I don't know if it's right," Sarah said finally. "But it's ours. For the first time since we left Earth, we're making a choice based on what we want, not on what others will allow us to have." As the New Horizon continued its journey through, Admiral Maya Chen Okafor was 45 years old when the galaxy changed forever. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Wanderer, watching long-range sensors display something that should have been impossible. Entire star systems were going dark across the galactic rim, their signals cut off as if someone had switched off a light. Maya had inherited command of the human fleet from her grandmother Sarah 5 years earlier. Under her leadership, the Voidborn had flourished, establishing mining operations throughout a dozen solar systems and developing technologies that impressed even the aliens who had once rejected them. They had become true nomads of space, more comfortable among the stars than any planet-bound species. Admiral, called Lieutenant Torres Kim, the ship's communications officer and grandson of the original Lieutenant Torres, "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian Authority. They're requesting immediate assistance." Maya raised an eyebrow. The crystalline Zephyrians had been among the first aliens to reject humanity, calling them biologically chaotic and emotionally volatile. For them to ask for help meant something truly desperate was happening. "Put them through," Maya ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the angular, translucent form of a Zephyrian commander. The being's crystal structure was fractured in several places, suggesting either injury or extreme stress. When it spoke, its normally melodic voice was harsh and broken. "Admiral Chen Okafor, I am Command Crystal Jektar of the Zephyrian Defense Authority. Our civilization faces extinction. An ancient enemy has returned from the void between galaxies. They call themselves the Devourers, and they are consuming entire star systems." Maya leaned forward in her command chair. "What kind of enemy can consume star systems?" "They are machines, but not like any technology we understand. They convert matter directly into copies of themselves, growing exponentially with each system they consume. Our most advanced weapons barely slow them down. Worse, they can infiltrate and corrupt our computer networks, turning our own technology against us." The transmission showed images that made Maya's blood run cold. Massive black ships, each the size of a small moon, surrounded planets and literally ate them, converting rock and metal into more ships. Space stations were dissolved in moments, their materials flowing into the Devourer fleet like water. "Why are you telling us this?" Maya asked. "Your people made it clear that humans were not welcome in civilized space." The Zephyrian's crystal structure flickered with what might have been shame. "Because we were wrong about your species. Your chaotic nature, your emotional volatility, your unpredictable behavior. These are not weaknesses. They are weapons against an enemy that relies on predicting and controlling ordered civilizations." Over the following days, more desperate messages arrived from across the galaxy. The hegemony of Vel reported that their vast underwater cities were being drained and processed by Devourer machines that could work underwater as easily as in space. The aquatic beings' careful, logical approach to warfare was useless against an enemy that could adapt faster than they could plan. The Synthesis Collective had been the first major civilization to fall. Their networked consciousness, which had made them incredibly efficient, became a fatal weakness when the Devourers learned to hack their shared mental network. In a matter of hours, trillions of machine intelligences had been turned against each other or simply shut down. Smaller species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive sent increasingly frantic requests for aid. The proud Altarian Republic, whose energy-based life forms had considered themselves superior to biological species, discovered that the Devourers could drain their energy as easily as they consumed matter. Maya called a council meeting aboard the Wanderer, bringing together representatives from all the human settlements scattered across space. The meeting room was filled with void-born commanders, engineers, and scientists who had spent their lives learning to survive in impossible conditions. Commander Elena Vasquez Wright, now in her 50s and leader of the mining fleet, spoke first. "Admiral, these alien civilizations spent decades rejecting us, calling us dangerous and chaotic. Now they want our help. Why should we risk our people for species that would never do the same for us?" Dr. Marcus Kim Santos, the fleet's chief scientist and son of the engineer David Kim Santos, pulled up holographic displays showing the Devourer advance. "Because if we don't stop them, there won't be any people left to save. Look at the pattern of their expansion. They're not just consuming alien worlds, they're heading toward Earth and human space." Maya studied the displays, watching the red indicators that marked destroyed systems creeping steadily across the galactic map. The Devourers were methodical, consuming everything in their path and leaving nothing but empty space behind. "There's something else," Dr. Kim Santos continued. "I've been analyzing the combat reports from the fallen civilizations. The Devourers seem to adapt to their enemies' technology and tactics within hours, but they're having trouble predicting chaotic emotional responses. Several alien commanders reported that their most successful attacks came when they abandoned careful planning and acted on instinct." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park Okafor, Maya's adopted daughter and a product of the Void-born generation, leaned forward. "Are you saying our emotional volatility is actually an advantage?" "Exactly. The Devourers are machines, even if they're incredibly advanced ones. They operate on logic and prediction models. They can analyze and counter any systematic approach to warfare, but they can't predict what a human will do when they get angry or desperate or scared." Maya looked around the room at her commanders. These people had grown up learning that their emotional nature was a flaw, something that made them unfit for galactic civilization. Now they were being told it might be their greatest weapon. "There's more," Dr. Kim Santos added. "Our technology might actually be immune to their infiltration attempts. All our systems are jury-rigged, cobbled together from salvaged parts and improvised solutions. There's no standard architecture for them to hack, no predictable patterns for them to exploit." Commander Torres Wright, the fleet's chief engineer, laughed grimly. "You mean 30 years of making do with spare parts and duct tape has prepared us to fight galaxy-eating machines?" "It's possible," Maya said thoughtfully. "Our ships don't follow standard designs. Our tactics aren't taught in any military academy. Our technology is a mixture of human engineering and alien salvage that probably shouldn't work at all." The debate continued for hours, but Maya had already made her decision. She thought of her grandmother Sarah, who had led the fleet through decades of rejection and hardship. She thought of all the Void-born who had died on hostile worlds while alien civilizations watched with indifference. Finally, she stood and addressed the council. "The aliens who rejected us are facing extinction. Part of me wants to let them face the consequences of their arrogance, but that's not who we are. We didn't survive 30 years in the void just to become the kind of people who abandon others in their time of need." She activated the holographic display, showing the current positions of human ships scattered across a dozen star systems. "We're going to fight. Not for the aliens who rejected us, but for the principle that someone should stand against genocide, even when it's committed by machines." Commander Vasquez Wright stood as well. "Then we'd better figure out how to fight an enemy that can eat planets." The next few weeks transformed the human fleet from nomadic survivors into a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had no massive battleships or advanced weapons, but they had something more valuable: unpredictability. Human tactics were based on improvisation and adaptation. When they attacked Devourer formations, they used strategies that changed from moment to moment. One ship would ram an enemy vessel, while another conducted a precision mining operation to extract critical components. A third ship might detonate its own fuel reserves to create a massive explosion. while a fourth used salvaged alien technology in ways its original creators never intended. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, encountered an enemy they couldn't predict or counter. Human ships appeared where logic said they shouldn't be, using weapons that no sane military would design. Most importantly, human crews made decisions based on intuition, emotion, and pure stubbornness rather than careful calculation. Maya led the first successful attack against a Devourer fleet at the Kepler 438 system. Using mining equipment and salvaged alien weapons, her small force managed to destroy 3 enemy ships and force the rest to retreat. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Someone had actually hurt the Devourers. Within days, every surviving alien government was sending desperate requests for human assistance. The same species that had once called humanity too chaotic for civilized space now begged for their chaotic approach to warfare. But Maya knew that scattered, hit-and-run attacks wouldn't be enough to stop the Devourers permanently. The ancient machines were learning from each encounter, slowly adapting to human unpredictability. Soon, even chaos wouldn't be enough to surprise them. The real test would come when the Devourer main fleet reached the core systems of the galaxy, where billions of LH the Void, carrying its K. Admiral Maya Chen Okafor stood at the edge of the solar system, watching Earth burn through the viewscreen of her flagship. Massive Devourer ships surrounded the blue planet like mechanical vultures, their dark hulls gleaming as they converted Earth's orbital stations into more of themselves. The automated defense systems that had once kept human exiles from returning home were now slag, consumed by the very threat they had failed to detect. Behind Maya, the bridge of the Wanderer hummed with activity as her crew coordinated with the scattered human fleet. 53 ships of various sizes hung in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, their hulls patched with salvaged alien metals, and their crews representing 40 years of adaptation to life among the stars. They were all that stood between Earth and complete annihilation. "Admiral," called Commander Sarah Park Okafor from the tactical station, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth's government. They're requesting immediate assistance and offering full pardons for all exiled citizens." Maya almost laughed at the irony. Pardons as if the Voidborn needed forgiveness for surviving the exile that Earth had forced upon them. As if 40 years of thriving among the stars was somehow a crime that required absolution. "Put them through," Maya ordered. The main screen flickered, showing a middle-aged man in an expensive suit standing in what appeared to be an underground bunker. Behind him, Maya could see other officials huddled around computer screens, their faces pale with fear. The man's voice shook as he spoke. "Admiral Chen Okafor, this is Chancellor Marcus Webb of the Terran Council. On behalf of all Earth's governments, I formally request your assistance in defending our homeworld. We are prepared to offer full citizenship restoration, advanced medical treatment for your people, and significant compensation for your decades of exile." Maya studied the man's face. Seeing the desperation there, she thought of her grandmother Sarah, who had died 5 years earlier without ever again seeing the sky under which she was born. She thought of all the Voidborn who had perished on failed colonies while Earth watched with indifference. "Chancellor Webb," Maya said finally, "your offer is noted, but before we discuss terms, I have a question. Where were these generous offers when our people were dying on radiation-blasted worlds? Where was Earth's concern when alien species destroyed our ships and killed our children?" The Chancellor's face reddened. "Admiral, surely past disagreements can be set aside in the face of this common threat. These machines threaten all human life. Past disagreements?" Maya's voice remained calm, but her crew could hear the steel underneath. "Chancellor, you didn't disagree with us. You exiled us. You sent us into space to die because you found us inconvenient. Now you want us to die for you instead." Commander Elena Vasquez Wright approached from the engineering station, her weathered face grim. "Admiral, the Devourer main fleet is beginning its final approach to Earth. If we're going to act, it has to be now." Maya nodded, then looked around the bridge at her officers. These were her people, the children and grandchildren of exiles raised among the stars, shaped by hardship into something stronger than their ancestors. They had never known the touch of natural rain or the warmth of a planetary sun, but they had learned to find beauty in the cold perfection of space. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen Okafor," Maya announced over the fleet communication system. "Prepare for combat operations. We're going to engage the Devourer fleet. A young officer at the communications station looked up in surprise. "Admiral, what should I tell the Chancellor about his offer?" Maya smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tell him we didn't come back for Earth's government. We came back for this." She gestured toward the view screen where Earth's blue marble hung surrounded by enemy ships. "This is still our homeworld, even if its leaders are no longer our family." The human fleet moved toward Earth with the fluid grace of people who had spent their entire lives in space. Their ships were smaller than the massive Devourer vessels, but they moved like schools of fish, coordinating without formal communication, adapting their formation to meet each new threat. Maya watched the tactical display as her ships began their attack. The mining vessel, Determination, commanded by Captain Torres Kim, used its industrial cutting lasers to slice through a Devourer ship's armor before ramming its cargo hold full of explosives into the enemy's core. The research ship Curiosity deployed a cloud of salvaged alien nanobots that confused the Devourer's targeting systems. The transport New Dawn converted its passenger compartments into missile launchers, firing a barrage of improvised weapons that followed no predictable pattern. The Devourers, for all their advanced technology, struggled to counter the chaotic human assault. Their weapons were designed to fight conventional fleets with standard tactics. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to ships that used mining equipment as weapons, or crews that made decisions based on intuition rather than logic. But the human fleet was vastly outnumbered. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. Maya watched her ships taking damage, saw friends and family members disappearing from the tactical display as their vessels were consumed by the enemy. "Admiral," called Dr. Marcus Kim Santos from the science station, "I'm detecting something unusual. The Devourer ships around Earth aren't just harvesting the planet's resources. They're scanning the surface, analyzing the population. I think they're trying to understand why Earth produced a species like us." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The Devourers weren't just consuming Earth. They were studying it, trying to learn what had created humanity's chaotic nature. If they succeeded, they might be able to counter human unpredictability in future encounters. "All ships, new priority target," Maya announced. "The scanning arrays around Earth must be destroyed before they can complete their analysis." The battle intensified as human ships threw themselves at the Devourer scanning installations. The destroyer Vengeance, crewed entirely by second-generation Voidborn, managed to destroy 3 scanning arrays before being overwhelmed. The supply ship Endurance converted its cargo holds into a massive bomb, sacrificing itself to take out a cluster of enemy vessels. As the fight raged around Earth, something unexpected happened. The planet's population, watching the battle from their underground shelters, began to understand what they were seeing. These weren't the desperate refugees who had left Earth 40 years earlier. These were their descendants returned as heroes to save a world that had abandoned them. Chancellor Webb's voice crackled over the communication system, his earlier arrogance replaced by awe. "Admiral, our sensors show you've destroyed over 30% of the enemy fleet. How is this possible?" Maya was too busy coordinating the battle to reply, but Commander Park Okafor answered for her. "Chancellor, we learned something during our 40 years in exile. When you have nothing left to lose, you become very dangerous." The tide of battle began to turn as the Devourers found themselves unable to predict or counter human tactics. Ships that should have been destroyed by conventional weapons survived through jury-rigged repairs and stubborn determination. Crews that should have surrendered when faced with impossible odds instead found creative ways to damage their enemies. But the cost was enormous. Of the 53 ships that had entered the battle, only 27 remained operational. The human fleet was bleeding crews and resources, and the Devourers were still learning to adapt to their chaotic approach. Maya made a decision that would have horrified any conventional military commander. She ordered all remaining ships to converge on the largest Devourer vessel, a massive command ship that was coordinating the enemy fleet's movements. "Admiral," Commander Vasquez Wright protested, "that's suicide. The entire fleet against one target?" "Elena," Maya said calmly, "we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to do something so completely insane that their computers can't process it." The surviving human ships formed a tight formation and plunged directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet. They ignored smaller enemy vessels, absorbing massive damage as they fought their way toward the command ship. When they reached it, they did something that no military AI could have predicted. They docked with the enemy vessel. Boarding parties of void-born Marines, equipped with salvaged alien weapons and improvised armor, fought their way through the Devourer command ship's corridors. They encountered defensive systems that would have stopped any conventional assault, but the humans weren't conventional. They used mining charges to blast through bulkheads, deployed jury-rigged hacking devices that confused the ship's computer systems, and fought with a desperate creativity that the Devourers couldn't counter. When they reached the command ship's core, the human boarding parties did something that sealed their victory. Instead of trying to destroy the vessel, they reprogrammed it. Using the chaotic mixture of human and alien technologies they had learned to blend together, the massive ship turned on its own fleet, broadcasting contradictory orders that threw the entire Devourer formation into confusion. As enemy ships began attacking each other, the remaining human vessels escaped from the chaos around Earth. The Devourer fleet, leaderless and confused, began to withdraw from the solar system, retreating to regroup and analyze what had happened.